Okay, this meeting is called to order. It's Wednesday, 2:31 p.m., February 22nd. In compliance with Public Law 24-109, Guam Ancestral Lands Commission published the public meeting announcement for Wednesday, February 22, 2023, in the Guam Daily Post on Wednesday, February 15, 2023, and Monday, February 20, 2023. Director, roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, Chairman Echeverria,
Present.
Vice Chairman Laguardia,
Yeah.
Secretary Treasurer Cruz,
Here.
Commissioner Camacho. Mr. Chair, I do not see Commissioner Camacho on. Hopefully she'll be logging in soon. Commissioner Olino,
Here.
Commissioner Rios. Also, I do not see Commissioner Rios logged in. I'll try to contact him and see if he'll be logging in soon. And
Okay,
Commissioner
noted.
Westling. Commissioner West. Thank you. Mr. Chair, you have 5 commissioners present. You have a quorum.
So Juice Masi, Director. Okay, we move down to item number 3. Pending litigations, legal counsel updates.
So this is a special meeting, and it was called especially for the purposes of one combined litigation, and that is to discuss the status of the settlement of the Taurus estate.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So there was an email from Commissioner Birch to the Attorney General's office asking for information with respect to the settlement, which had been entered into in July 2020. I believe this same topic was discussed at the December 14th, 2022 meeting. There's really not too much more that this office has to add to. That was Mr. Toft who was present at that meeting. Specifically, what had happened, the chairman's, Mr. Birch's inquiry asked for documents. He wanted to see, asking for documents showing where it says that the commission's interest and the government of Guam's interest or the Attorney General's interest were not aligned. And again, that was basically answered at the December meeting, where Mr. Toft iterated with respect to the government of Guam was the plaintiff in all 5 of those cases. I won't just call it one because there are 5 cases plus 2 probates, so 7 cases altogether. But just for simplicity, we'll just call it, the Taurus estate collectively. That it was the government of Guam who was the plaintiff and not the commission. And so therefore the amended complaints, and each one of those had a complaint that was amended a couple times, maybe 3 times, I believe, some of them. And they in all of them, it is the government of Guam and the public's interest that is the plaintiff and not the commission. So, and you, the commission should already have copies of those. Probably can have better access than we do.
So Sandra, you're talking about the Jamie Cantor memo to Nick Toft?
I am talking about, Jamie's memo to Nick Toft is dated November 9th. And then the commission had a regular meeting on December 14th. And this email inquiry was also discussed at that meeting.
So I appeared before the commission here last year in February, just almost exactly a year ago, and I asked about what was going on with the Taurus estate cases. And Nick told us that they were still at the Guam Supreme Court, which was completely, incorrect, because it turns out it had all been dismissed back in July of 2020, a year and a half before. So then I appeared again in July, and I by that time I had looked into the files and seen there had been dismissals. And I said, what's going on here? And then in July, Nick said, "Oh, I'll look into it. I'll look into it, and I'll let the commission know at the next hearing." And then a couple of weeks later, about 6 weeks later, I did a Sunshine Act request, and I finally got a copy of the settlement agreement that had been entered into 2 years prior, which was just dismissed all the cases for zero. And I believe that as soon as I obtained the settlement agreement, I think that the AGs finally provided it to the commission. Then in September of last year, a little more than 2 years after this settlement agreement had been reached, this confidential settlement agreement that the commission was kept in the dark about for 2 years. Now, and then I started asking questions about it. Next thing I know, they were pointing fingers at me, saying that I created some kind of a conflict of interest, which had precluded the AG's office from even consulting with the commission on the cases. Now, one of the red herrings here is to say that.
Sorry, Bill. 1 second. Can you either step back just a little bit or lower down your microphone a bit, because it's just a little bit distorted or muffled. Just it's a little boomy. Can you just maybe step back a little bit, or if you have the control there, you can lower it down. It's not your monitor.
How does it sound now?
Hello.
Any better?
Try again. There, I think that's better. Try it. Yeah. There.
So first of all, Sandra, well, there's a couple of things here. In what sense were the government's interests and the Ancestral Lands Commission's interests ever not aligned? I mean, the Ancestral Lands Commission is an instrumentality of the government. As a matter of law, it just can't have conflicting interests that I can conceive. And so does the AG's office have an answer to that they were saying that they were not a non-alignment of interest, which I just can't conceive, except only there was some of the cases that got dismissed, not the big one with the $20 million, but a couple of the cases where there were lands that had been transferred into the commission's inventory that were not federal return lands. In fact, the first case that, and those were cases where, that's the case where they made a big to-do, Jamie did, about that I had filed a motion to amend a complaint back in 2007 to allege, to join the commission as a third-party defendant, which I soon thereafter withdrew when I thought it through and realized that there's no such thing as a distinction really between the Ancestral Lands Commission and the government of Guam, because the Ancestral Lands Commission is an instrumentality of the government and cannot sue or be sued in its own name. There are several rulings to that effect. In the packet that I kind of put together with excerpts from a lot of the cases, there's one case from Judge Sokola where she points that out, that the estate had tried to dismiss that case because the Ancestral Lands Commission was not the named plaintiff, and Judge Sokola said, "Oh no, that's the way it has to be, because the Ancestral Lands Commission cannot sue or be sued in its own name. It's the government of Guam that brings the case." And in fact, in the Guam Supreme Court case about the $20 million case, CV 1124-09, which was the first thing I put in that packet. There was a footnote which said, it appears the government's representation of the GALC was in dispute at one point. However, this is not an issue on appeal, and no party now contends that the government is not the proper representative of the GALC. So it's really a red herring to say that it's very misleading to say that the OAG, the Office of the Attorney General, could not consult with the commission because the commission was not the named party in any of the suits, when the commission cannot sue or be sued in its own name as a matter of law. And that's Judge Lamarena recognized that in one of the cases that got dismissed, the CB 454-10, I think it is. And of course, in the big case, the Guam Supreme Court recognized that the OAG was representing the GALC. But getting back to where I was at a few minutes ago, there were some parcels that were not federal return lands that had been improperly transferred into the commission's inventory in a deed in 2002. That deed's included in that packet that I had distributed to everybody. There was a deed signed by Governor Gutierrez and AG Kono, who was the appointed AG at the time, not an elected AG, not an independent AG, and Roland Montanonia, who was your lawyer at the time, which transferred 6 parcels into your inventory that were not federal return lands. In that first case, where the estate sued the government because the commission had quote unquote returned to the estate a parcel of land that was the easement, the entry exit behind the mall, the Fatima Street easement. That had been improperly put into your inventory and then conveyed to the estate, and the estate sued the government. And that's when I was the second lawyer on the case. When it came across my desk, I said, what's going on here? Why is this land even in the commission's inventory? And so I looked into it and realized that it should not have been in inventory. It just shouldn't have been put in your inventory. I don't think the commission, as a matter of law, could ever have an argument against that. I mean, if land does not belong in your inventory, if it's not federal return land, then the commission could not have an interest in wanting to have land in your inventory that is not federal return land, that is not by law supposed to be in your inventory. So in that case was a lot of back and forth. I finally got a settlement. I got with the estate, the mall. It turned out that, I guess, back when they were building the mall, the mall purchased a bunch of property from GovGuam, to build the mall. But they had, for some reason, that had fallen through the cracks, that little parcel. And we did a settlement where, since it was so confusing, where the mall paid $460,000, I think it was, and the estate took half and the government took half. And I believe the government paid it into the Ancestral Lands Commission, even though that was not federal return properties. In the packet that I gave to you, in fact, about 10 pages in, there's a brief filed by the estate Tories lawyers in the federal district court, where they were making the argument that this is not federal return land because in that first case with the mall's lawyers had tried to do what's called remove it into federal court, thinking that this was all had to do with federal return lands. The estate's lawyers, with Mr. Rosano, made the argument, and it's the correct argument, that this is not federal because they didn't want it in federal court. But this is not federal excess land. It was a guaranteed claim issued to GovGuam as far back as 1928. And that's that federal guaranteed claim issued to GovGuam back in 1928 was the result of the whole Duarte, the whole Duarte situation where he embezzled the money and the government was putting his land up for restitution for the $40,000 that he had embezzled, and Mr. Jose Martinez Torres paid $2,000 on a $4,000 contract and asked for the government to keep. I think you know the history, to keep that land out of the auction for restitution, but the government said no, and that was just the end of it. They nobody else made a big bid at the auction back in 1915, and the land became federal land. And I think we're all familiar with that history. That was the Mr. Martinez Torres' beef with the government with what had happened back in 1915, and that this they didn't have a claim. So they never had a claim under the statute. But we know that they had Roland Montanoni, who was your lawyer, who had actually been a party to transferring several properties into your inventory with Mr. Gutierrez and A.G. Kono back in 2002. And he, I think, actually came before you and tried to convince you that it was entirely proper for you to go earlier than 1930 and accept arguments that somebody had been unjustly treated back even before 1930, and therefore they should be awarded lands, which I think you guys rightly said, well, we need to have a court decide this. And it was pretty clear. It was pretty clear to me that from Mr. Charfus's what he said at that meeting back in 2006, that you wanted a court to make a ruling about whether the Torres estate claim was legitimate. And of course, so actually, I want to say, so in that big case, I actually won what's called a summary judgment with Judge Barcenas. That the lawyers had taken advantage of your not being lawyers and not really understanding what was going on when they took it to a probate court, and actually won a summary judgment that got reversed in the Guam Supreme Court, saying there were things that still had to be proven. That basically that live testimony had to be taken. We couldn't get a judgment just on the transcript of that hearing, because by that time, Mark Charfus was saying that the transcript did not reflect what he really meant. So that got reversed by the Supreme Court, but that just meant the summary judgment was reversed, and we had to have a trial. Mr. Toft came before the commission. He was saying he didn't understand what the case was or what the remedy was. And obviously the remedy always was to get the money. We all saw that, at least I saw, and when I first framed the complaint, was that since Mr. Ewan had relied upon a court order, a probate court order, but why would he know the difference either? And he had purchased the land, paid the $20 million. And so I said, well, that's probably what's called a bona fide good faith purchaser. So we made the decision right from the beginning to go after the money, instead of having it paid to the Torres estate, have it paid to the commission and go where it should go, to the people who are not getting their lands returned. So I guess I'm just touching on that point right now, because Mr. Toft was saying he couldn't see, and Mr. Canto couldn't see where the remedy lied. But the remedy was always very clear. The Supreme Court mentioned it, what it was about. It was getting the money, the proceeds for the land. So they did this. I got so there was the big case, the fact that they did this confidential settlement on, plus two other cases that had these lands that were on the mall side of Marine Corps Drive that had been transferred to your inventory by by Mr. Gutierrez and A.G. Kono and Roland Montanoia. So they dismissed all these cases, even though they had different bases. Some of the cases were based just upon the fact that the land should never have been in your inventory. The big case was the land that was properly in your inventory. It was federal return land. But just the question was always whether the Torres estate had a valid claim to it under the statute, which was a pretty, to my mind, it's pretty clear they didn't, but maybe that could be argued. But you would think that at least there would have been a settlement on that. And in the other cases where I got the settlement, I got $230,000 or $50,000 in a settlement on that very first case with the land behind the easement behind the mall. And so the AG, Mr. Canto, did he ever appear before you guys? Did he ever actually come and appear at one of your meetings or interview you at all?
No.
Yeah, so and I don't understand this distinction that they try to draw, Mr. Toff was trying to draw between who is the lawyer for the commission and this, what they call this litigation division, as if they're completely sealed off from each other. They're all on the same floor. And, you know, any lawyer understands a little bit of both or a lot of both. He should understand a pretty lot of both. So they start, well, this, and Mr. Canto, it really bothers me that he did this settlement with his brother-in-law's law firm. His brother-in-law is Mr. Rosano's partner and wrote briefs in the case. So he's talking to his brother-in-law's law firm, but not talking to you and doing this settlement, as you've all pointed out, during the lockdown. And not even telling anybody for more than 2 years until I started asking questions and kind of forced their hand on, and they start blaming me for everything. And they didn't even try to get a settlement. They didn't even try to get anything. And of course, you have a fiduciary duty to what's called the dispossessed landowners, you know, to try to obtain funds for the land trust.
Are you saying that
Pardon me?
Rosano's partner, you're saying that Rosano's partner is Canto's brother-in-law?
Yeah, Joshua Walsh. And Joshua, he was actively involved in the litigation. He wrote briefs in the case. He wrote briefs in the Guam Supreme Court, I read. In fact, much of what Nick Toff was saying was kind of parroting arguments made by the Mr. Walsh and Mr. Rosano. Their whole story. He was just kind of parroting their story as if that's what this thing was all about.
So he's saying he's parroting their argument.
That's what it looked like to me when he appeared before you on the 14th. He was saying how the complaint was wildly divergent from what had happened. He was saying that Mrs. O'Keefe had said she has to get the heirs' permission, and so she has to go to probate court. And the complaint that was filed was saying that what they were supposed to have done was what was moved for by Mr. Charfus, which was to bring this to a court and have a court decide the validity of their claim. And Mr. Toff was just, of course the complaint was wildly divergent from what they say was supposed to happen, which was that she was just supposed to go to court and get the heirs' consent to what was it, to agree not to bring any more claims against the commission, any more claims to the commission rather for lands, which always seemed pretty bizarre to me. I mean, if you don't have valid claims, you shouldn't be there. If you do have valid claims, you shouldn't be precluded from bringing further claims against, for land that you do have a valid claim to. Anyways, when Mr. Toff was saying, oh, the complaint that was brought was wildly divergent. Well, of course it was wildly divergent because it was saying that the commission had told the lawyers to bring it to a court and have a court decide on the validity of the claim. So I mean, he could think that the estate had maybe the stronger argument. Maybe that's what he really thinks. But obviously, I mean, everybody knows that they didn't have a valid claim. This was way before 1930. This was not federal return land, federal condemned land in the World War II era, and it wasn't even after 1930. So, and then they do this without telling anybody for more than 2 years until I start poking into it. Then they start pointing the finger at me, and so the whole thing is really it's really troubles me. I don't know. Just Sandra, have you thought of any of these things that I'm talking about here? Have you looked at any of the filings and looked at some of the things that I'm talking about right now?
Attorney Miller, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry. Okay, yes, Bill, thank you. I did go over your letter to Director Birch and it included, it's like 50 some pages, and it attached all the documents that you just described, including the deed and certain court opinions. And if the question is what happened in the middle of COVID during July 2020, I'm not sure that any of us here, I certainly was not here with the commission.
Well, tell me this, do you think it's appropriate, I mean, even for 2 full years, not to tell the commission what happened, to actually make misrepresentations last year in February and July? For Mr. Canto to do this with his brother-in-law's law firm, to not even obtain any kind of a monetary settlement like I had obtained in the one case that I settled, that first one with the lot behind the Micronesian Mall. Do you think that any of this is at all, is it all appropriate?
I don't know enough about this to, make a ruling as to, I'm not the judge as to whether something is
Can you look into it? I know you're pretty new to this. Could you look into it?
I'll certainly look at this. Is a long
whether Mr. Canto was just off on his own, and whether he should be whether some kind of action should be taken with respect to Mr. Canto.
Yeah, I'd like to add something real quick, if I may. We've had offers for settlements in the past.
Right.
And we've entertained settlement offers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall the board. I like to ask the board if the board ever recalls there being an issue about representation, who's actually being represented in these court cases, because for all these times we always thought we were the ones that were being represented in court. And then to me, this is the first time I'm hearing it. I just want to ask the board if they recall any briefings and updates with the Attorney General's office letting us know that there's an issue, because I don't recall it. This is the first, this is the first time I heard it when I saw the documents that there was a question on who the plaintiffs are, which is basically us, right? We're the plaintiffs.
And in fact, like I pointed out in the Guam Supreme Court ruling in the big case back in 2015, in that footnote, they said, the government is the proper representative of the GALC in the case. That's that. If there was a question about that footnote resolved, but the Guam Supreme Court said the Gov Guam is the proper representative of the GALC.
And at the very least, the AG should have given us the courtesy, their intention to do this, and then explain to us why. But to arbitrarily just go in there and do
Yeah.
this is disturbing. Very disturbing. And it's during the pandemic. We're in a lockdown.
Yeah.
And I'd like to reiterate that we've got offers for settlements, and we have we refused. If I remember correctly, we refused those settlement offers, basically because we felt that the trust has been compromised. We had meetings with higher level elected officials to see if it's possible to compromise. They weren't forcing us. They were just looking into it. We took it under advisement and we didn't do it. And here, this happens. Just like that, in a lockdown. This is very disturbing. The very least they should have was waited, then give us the information, their intention of what they plan to do. That's my opinion.
And then for 2 years, they keep it hidden.
That's
I mean, Senator, I think your office, I mean, if Mr. Cantor was really acting beyond his authority here, then an action needs to be taken against him.
If the commission has an issue with how the case was handled, as you know, Bill, there are avenues that it can take. There are complaints it can make.
I don't know, Senator, what they would be. If you could look into it, I don't know what they would be, except at this point going after Mr. Cantor personally. If you can think of other avenues, I don't know what they are, Sandra.
I don't, like you, Bill, I don't know at this time. I really would have to think about it.
So I don't, as I know, so I don't know, and I think neither of us does, because I can't see anything else that can be done at this point but going after Mr. Cantor and anybody that may have known what what was going on, that who also signed any of the took part in that settlement and dismissal.
Okay. I know that the Attorney General's office believes that it acted appropriately and that it acted in the best interest of the public.
Which Attorney General's office is this? The current administration or the past administration?
I'm just speaking as to what Mr. Cantor's email says and what Mr. Toff represented at the meeting. And during that administration, that administration was still in effect as of November 9th and in December 2022. The current administration is very new. It's literally, been about 6 weeks on the job here. I'm probably 2 to 3 weeks myself. And, I don't have any answers for the commission as to what it can do or what it's appropriate to do.
And there's a statute of limitations that we're facing, according to.
Well, if there's a breach of fiduciary duty cause of action out there, it has to be brought within 3 years. There's also what's called the discovery rule, that when there's a fraud of sorts that is kept hidden from you, it's 3 years from the time when you should have learned about the misrepresentations made to you, or the fraud, or things done behind your back. But to be on the safe side, you always want to try to bring any action within 3 years of the actual breach of fiduciary duty, which would be July of 2020.
So are you
I would like to know.
recommending something, Bill?
Pardon, what?
I'm sorry, are you recommending
I'm
something?
recommending that the office find out what happened. Were there negotiations? Are there letters and emails between the AG's office and the attorneys for it's the Cunliffe and Cook office and the Rosano office about what were there negotiations? Was there some reason why they just dismissed everything? Why the AG's just dismissed everything for zero?
Yeah, it's like how is it we're receiving throughout the years, settlement offers, and then the AG's just has it dismissed with prejudice. It's crazy.
In some of these cases, like I said, they had involved lands that were not even supposed to be in the commission's inventory at all. And there was even a stronger cause of action on those, like that those lands should not have been awarded to the estate, and that any deeds to the estate of lands that should not have been put into the commission's inventory at all should be voided.
So Bill, I think you did ask the Attorney General, you sent a FOIA requesting the documents that you're discussing right now, whether there was any emails or correspondence between the attorneys. And the response was that there were no documents that we had in our possession.
No, the response
there are no
was-
documents responsive.
No,
Because-
that was the response was that there were no documents that they believe they are required to show them. They didn't say there are no such documents. They just said there are no such documents that they believe, that the office believes it is required to show. And so there's two things that I was asking about: any correspondence between Mr. Canto and Mr. Camacho, whether the AG actually knew about this, or whether Mr. Canto was actually, it was just out there on his own with his brother-in-law doing this. So correspondence between Mr. Canto and Mr. Camacho, if that exists, and correspondence between Mr. Canto and the attorneys for the estate, the Cunliffe and Cook office and the Rosano Walsh Torres office. I think your office can provide those if you want to. The response I got last week on my FOIA request is that they believe they're not required to show them to me.
If I may, and I could share a screen with because I'm reading it, and it says there are no documents responsive to your request in the custody of the Office of the Attorney General. It also asserted the attorney-client privilege.
It says that are required to be produced. That's the last line of each of those responses.
Are we looking at the same letter? February 14th, 2023?
Yes.
Okay, there are no documents responsive to your request in the custody of the Office of the Attorney General required to be produced.
Right, because they're asserting privileges. So they're not saying that such documents don't exist.
It's saying there's no responsive documents. So, and
Can
again,
you
Bill,
look
if
into
you
it,
have,
and can you look into it and let us know whether there are no such documents? And if there are no such documents at all, that itself is telling that Mr. Canto was way out there on his own. And if there are such, if there are such documents, if the Attorney General's office would waive the privilege and produce them, because they're saying that they're not required to be produced.
you could, this was signed, this document was just sent about less than 10 days ago. If you would like to send a follow-up, you're welcome to do that.
I'll do that.
Yeah, and perhaps that way you can copy the commission and.
Can I CC you too on it?
Sure. Yeah. It will
Vice
go
Chair?
to.
Vice Chair, you have your hands up?
Yeah, I have a comment. If I'm correct, Mr. Chairman, I believe Attorney Finney was our attorney at one point in time. And she has she's familiar with this case. And I'm just
Very
surprised
familiar.
that she's not here, present. Can you get with her, Attorney Miller? And please review these, the documents and try to attain them, because I do recall that there is that she is familiar with what was going on at that time. We can go ahead.
Yes, I did speak with Kristen Finney briefly about this when we were first both attached to recently when we were assigned to the commission. And she has some recollection of the times and events that you're talking about, but I'll certainly get with her again and see if she remembers what specifically, like you were saying about other settlements that you were offered. Because before there was Mr. Mantegnonia, and then I think it was Miss Finney, and then Mr. Toft. Is that correct?
Who are you addressing that to?
No,
To just who are your lawyers during this time period? I guess I'm just trying to, because you
No, but your
mentioned
question-
Miss Finney. Oh, I'm just
sorry,
addressing it to anybody.
Vice Chair?
yeah, we even had Mr. Attorney Highsmith is also familiar with this case.
Very, very familiar.
Mhm.
And yeah, and is he still within your office up there, the Attorney General's office?
And no, he's not. Did he
Yeah,
represent the
he works
commission?
at the office that I'm working at now, the Public Defender Office.
Yes, he represented us.
Yes, he represented
Yes.
us in these cases also,
He
yeah.
represented us well too. He
Well,
was fighting this in court.
do you wanna, so you're addressing your question to just just in general, your question?
Yeah, my question, I guess, is to whoever can remember, because you mentioned, Mr. Chair, that Attorney Finney had been your lawyer, and but I know she wasn't the only one, and so I was just trying to figure
Yes,
out
yes.
who else would have
Yes,
knowledge.
and then it was Highsmith, and then after that we had Toft, and then back to Finney. Vice Chair?
May I suggest, if this is if that response regarding the information was that issued out by the past Attorney General, and if so, why can't, is it possible if we can get the current Attorney General to look into this matter?
Yeah.
Are you talking about the
Yep.
email from Mr. Toft
Correct.
to the commission,
Yeah,
attaching Jamie Canto's response?
Correct.
Is that the one?
And-
Okay.
Yeah, not only that, Attorney Miller, but this whole matter is very appalling, and I would, if at all possible, if we can bring it to the Attorney General, because he seems to be a very stern type of individual that would look into such matters of possible improprieties. Thank you.
Okay. So the request is, and I can do that. I can forward the
Well, we will-
commission's.
We would think he's aware of it already. We just thought he probably is, but if not, then yes, of course. I echo the Vice Chair's comments. Getting him-
He's aware, but you're asking him to do certain actions, and so your request is to look into
Further.
this matter and
Yeah, further,
determine
yeah.
whether the correct action was, or the
Taken.
appropriate action was taken back in July of 2020.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Am I saying-
I think it's in line with our fiduciary duty to the trust.
That's right.
And just provide him all that information from our former attorney, Bishop, because he just refreshed our memory with regards to that, this case, which I completely agree, because, you know, we see those lands now, right up there, right behind the mall, you know, and all of a sudden, like you said, those were never in our inventory, yet now they're out for sale. And I see that right now at this very moment.
See, the Attorney General now happened to be the Attorney General at the time that we were hearing these cases. And there was a question of representation regarding our legal counsel. So we were operating without legal counsel, and we shouldn't have operated at all. But the board was naive at the time, and we were pressured to give out lands. I mean, as much lands as we could within reason. So we operated, and we got bamboozled by attorneys. In all honesty, we got bamboozled, and we gave a conditional deed. And here we are now, almost 20 years later, we got bamboozled by attorneys again. The very least was we should have been notified before any action was done, at least that this is the intention. You don't have a, you know, you don't have the, you're not really the party to this case. After years of court, going into court, being with depositions, was it depositions, board members?
Right. Deposition.
Right, being called into offices, giving depositions,
Right.
and then now we're not a party to it.
No, not anymore.
Even our former chairman, Tony Ada, was summoned. I think all of us were stated in the lawsuit. So just look into it. I guess you just need to read through the
And
more
yes, some just to answer your question, yes, we did get settlement offers.
We did, yes.
Some of them, of course, were like unofficial, but they were legit per se. Okay, so where are we at right now?
I would be happy to take the commission's request up to the Attorney General to have him review the events that transpired in 2020. And, you know, perhaps he also has some memory. You're saying he was the Attorney General back when these events first transpired. So he may have
Exactly.
a recollection. Yeah.
Exactly. When the
Right.
more actually, he might not be too aware. Maybe afterwards, he might have been out already because, you know, the events that happened where we went into court. I'm not sure if he was still in office or he was out of office at the time.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but
But when we gave the conditional deed, he was the Attorney General. We didn't have legal counsel. He was in court with the executive branch, I believe, on who's the who actually is by law going to, you know, entitled to being the legal counsel for ancestral lands and CLTC. I would gather.
okay, I will do that.
Well, he
I
ended
think
up
what
prevailing.
it's saying,
He
Sanders,
ended
there's
up
not
prevailing
actually an
because now-
attorney present.
I'm sorry, Bill?
I think what Ron is saying is there was not actually, Mr. Moreland was the was the Attorney General at the time, but there was no actual attorney assigned to the commission present at the meetings when these events transpired.
That's right.
And
In hindsight, the board should have just put a stay or a moratorium on or just not entertain giving out lands until we had legal counsel. That's what we should have done.
But so after the estate sued the government, and I started to look into it and realized what had happened, and we brought the lawsuits.
Okay, I think we're at Ms. Miller, I guess you're gonna bring it up to the Attorney General.
I will, I will do that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Vice Chair, your hand was up.
yeah, just one final comment. Perhaps, if you have, Bill, Mr. Bishop had been representing us for some time, and perhaps he can do a quick summary review. I don't know, Bill, you don't work for us anymore, but a quick point by point summary, to refresh the memories of our cases, and that would probably lead to some sort of ringing to the Attorney General and how we can move forward with this, because I agree, there's just something funny. And we're
And
not.
it's kind of odd, and we because you got the Attorney General's office. I think it's still one office. I'm not too sure. There's two different administrations, but yet is it one office? I mean, two different. You know what I mean? You got a previous Attorney General, and you have this Attorney General, but it's the same office. So it's kind of odd, and we're requesting, something, you to have the Attorney General look into something, and yet it's his office, our legal counsel, that did this.
Okay, understood.
Okay, thank you.
I think Bill gave a nice summary at the beginning of this meeting that all we have to do is watch the video.
I'm happy to meet with you, Sandra, anytime if you want to discuss it.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Bill. I may take you up on that.
And the board got the packet, right, with the summary of or was it the summary, or exactly the judgment, or actually the dismissal of the case? And then I think, Director, there's more than that, right? I think it's also some other litigations was attached to that, or?
Yes, I attached everything that Attorney Bischoff sent us.
Okay.
It's just excerpts from several of the filings and the cases.
Yes, including all the issues that Attorney Tuff and Deputy Attorney General Canto sent their letters. That was included. I also included my inquiry, which was not responded to by either Canto or Tuff.
Really?
Okay, any further questions? Commissioners, any further questions? No further questions. Director, you have anything to add, or?
No, I just want to thank both Attorney Miller and Attorney Bishop for bringing this out into open for all of us here. I kind of knew what had occurred. I wasn't here when all of this occurred, but reading through it, yes, and it's a very complicated case. And I came in here at Ancestral Lands just about the time this thing was dismissed, and we did not have a board. We had two commissioners on and one employee here at Ancestral Lands, and that's when this whole thing occurred during the middle of the coronavirus shutdown. Yeah, everything was on lockdown during that time, so it did feel kind of bad about what occurred. I mean, no one was here to to be contacted at the time, and it didn't have to occur this quickly. You know, they could have waited. We had, when I was sent up here to reestablish the agency, within 5-6 months, we were up and running again. So this occurred when we were pretty much shut down during the lockdown period. So that caught us by surprise. And of course, we did ask about the case, and we were assured that it was still in court. Everything was moving forward, to find out when Attorney Bishop brought it to our attention that he checked in on it and it had been dismissed. And that was a big surprise to all of us.
That's right.
So, yeah, that's pretty much the bottom line. So all we have was a whole bunch of questions. So I thank
just like-
Attorney Bishop for bringing it up to our attention, and Attorney Miller for trying to bring clarification to it, and also for agreeing to look into the matter and see if there was anything or that occurred between any attorneys in the AG's office and the attorneys for the parties out there. So at least to give us satisfaction in that area, and hopefully we could get this back on track. I see Vice Chair Laguardia has his hand up.
Mr. Chairman?
Vice Chair.
Yeah,
Vice
just the final comments, just Mossy. I just want to hats off and Betunahaw, Bill. It's in Bill's heart. Kaya corazon niya si Bill to representa it, because tunga si Bill sa Filipino si Bill. Bill speaks tomorrow, and his heart is within the
Yeah,
people.
did
Know
ya?
what is good, what is right, and what is just. It's the not so si Bill. So his heart is in the fight for the Chamorro people. It shows in him that he speaks the Chamorro language. Ganige, just Mossy Bill.
Maga-
He's
I
Magahe.
echo that too. I just want to add one more thing real quick. Toph is not with us anymore. He's not in the government of Guam anymore, but in not so many words, he too gave the impression of a sour taste in his mouth regarding this whole shenanigans.
He did.
What
Yeah.
happened? He
did.
relayed his dismay, if I may say, and his like I said, his dismay with the way it was handled. So again, I'd like to echo our director's thoughts and our vice chair. Thank you, Sandra, for coming in, and Bill for having this special meeting with us. If there's no further questions, I'm going to, okay. I'm sorry, Commissioner Wesley?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just want to echo my sentiments like everybody else here, and really to thank you, Attorney Bishkoff, for keeping this in the forefront and in front of us to remind us the errors, or at least the suspicious activities. And for Attorney Miller for being here as well, and for being our newly appointed attorney. I know I've heard, it said here several times that, the decision, the judgment, happened back in 2020 during lockdown, and, things were difficult, but, in spite of that, it might have been a remnant commission at that time, but it was still there. Okay. And all of us were still here on island. And the Attorney General's office could have, with a little bit of effort, find out a way how to contact us. Okay, it's not like we were out on Mars. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, the names of the commission members is public information. Director Birch was our newly appointed director at that time. And all of this is public information. So with a little bit of effort, they could have notified us, but for whatever reason, they did not. They did not. And so I too would like to, get down to the bottom of this and find out what happened. So thank you all for being here, and for your continued efforts and interest in keeping this in the forefront.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Wesley. And Bill's correct. There could have been even an offer for settlement at the very least. It was not even in play. Let's just dismiss it. So, okay, so we're done. Sujus Masi, everybody, director, staff of GALC. I'd like to welcome again Therese Tapasio. Welcome
Welcome
to
to it.
GALC. And
Welcome to
I'd like to wish Commissioner Orlino a safe trip back. Enjoy your time and say hello to Danny from the board from us.
Sure. I'm ready to sleep.
Yes.
Motion
We'll let her
to
go.
adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
I'm sorry, I can hear.
Motion to adjourn.
So move.
Okay, motion to adjourn. It's now 3:31. This meeting is adjourned. Sujus Masi.
Sujus
Thank you.
Masi.
Thank you, everyone.
you.
Bye,
Adios.
guys.
Attorney Miller, thank